welcome back to Megan Haskell's book club. I'm recording this a week early, but for those of you in the US, by the time this airs, you should have just had Thanksgiving yesterday. So I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I hope you took the day off. I know I did, but which is why I'm recording this a week in advance. So there you go. But anyway, we're going to continue the story of Aether Bound with chapter 12. Here we go. Chapter 12. I'm not dead. And neither was Ezra. I was sure of it. Somehow this was all a big mistake, a big misunderstanding. Sorry to break it to you, but if you're here, you've left the seen world. The only way to do that is to leave your body and everything else behind. But don't worry, you've come to the best of the possible afterlives. Valhalla and the Elysian fields combined can't compare to Aegir's feast. And you've come at the perfect time. Aegir is getting ready to host another grand gathering of the gods. All 9 daughters have been called home to prepare the mead and serve at the feast. The bartender leaned forward, glancing from side to side and speaking out of the side of his mouth. Rumor has it, Tempest, the youngest, didn't want to come home. Ran had to cast her net and drag her down in a storm. Family, know what I mean? But now that she's back, the feast can start. Tempest was here? Then so was Ezra. My heart raced, and yes, I was happy to say I could still feel it. The demon was wrong about being dead. But if Tempest was the youngest daughter of Aegir, did that mean she was a goddess? So Aegir is a god? The bartender nodded. Primordial god of the ocean. Then who's Ran? Aegir's current wife, number 10 to be precise. A gong reverberated through the room, and all eyes turned to gaze at a beam of light that had appeared out of nowhere. The revelers quieted. Perfect timing, the bartender whispered. You get to see them in all their glory. As I watched, 3 figures appeared as if formed of mist, then solidified. In the center, a giant of a man dominated the space. At least 6.5 feet tall, he wore a long, bushy beard with beads decorating the strands. Twinkling blue eyes shined from beneath heavy black brows. But like all proper hipsters, his mustache was curled and styled with wax, and his hair had been combed into a perfect wave on the top of his head. A few wrinkles around his eyes suggested he was a jovial fellow, used to having a good time. Sort of like a modern black-haired Santa, but without the giant bag of gifts, or the jelly belly. So nothing like Santa at all, really. When I was finally able to tear my gaze away from the man, I almost fell off my stool. Standing next to him was none other than my mother. Dark auburn hair hung loose in a tangled mane of frizzy tresses. Striking hazel eyes framed by long lashes sparkled with joy. I wanted to slap the sparkle right out of her. My mother, though she could hardly claim the name, turned to the man who had materialized behind her. He was sitting in a chair, his face hidden from view behind her swirling skirts. Her free hand reached back to his shoulder, pulling him forward in a wheelchair. This time, I didn't even bother trying to stay on my stool. Ezra was here with her. I gripped the mead snifter so hard the stem broke off in my hand, spilling the mead across the counter. Easy there. The bartender kept his voice low, which was probably good since Aegir had started to speak. With quick movements, he cleaned the mess, then brought me a new cup with a fresh pour. I took a sip as I tried to figure out what to do. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to my hall and the Feast of Renewal. Today is a great blessing, for not only has my youngest daughter returned from her sojourn, she has also brought with her the lost son of our new mother, Ran. Hold on a hot minute, I whispered. That woman is Ran? My mother's name was Rain, similar, but not the same, and she wasn't a goddess. Aegir might be a god, but not her. She was a bohemian wanderer at best, an attempted murderer in truth. Maybe an actual murderer, since Ezra was here. The bartender leaned in close, better to share the gossip. I think this is the first time I've seen her smile since she bound herself to Aegir. Aegir lifted a glass that appeared in his hand from nowhere. The bright colored liquid inside sloshed with his movement. Let us drink and celebrate the renewal of our great domain. With Ran by my side, our harvest will be bountiful and our feast eternal. Leave your regrets at the door, join our party, and feel the glory of your desires come to life. Skål! I grimaced, but the hand holding my drink lifted as if pulled by invisible strings, and I drank to the coming feast. Welcome to Aegir's Hall, the host demon's voice boomed right behind me. Grab a drink and join the party. A rather befuddled woman slid onto the stool next to me. The bartender tipped his head and shot me a grin. Looks like I have a new customer. I took another sip of the mead and nodded. I think I'll take a look around. Enjoy! If you need anything, I'm Dion. Come find me when you're ready for something new. Thanks, Dion. He was already leaning forward toward the new arrival. What can I get you? As crowded as it had been when I arrived, it was 10 times worse since Aegir's little speech. People appeared from nowhere. Literally. As far as I could tell, there were no doors in this place, no windows. It was a sealed building. So how were people getting in? How had I gotten in? I didn't imagine the gods needed a teleportation machine, but something had to beam them and everyone else into and out of the hall, right? I shook my head. I'd worry about that part later. I'd gotten here, after all. I could find my way out. In the meantime, I needed to find my brother and avoid my mother, and somehow avoid being caught by Aegir, god of the sea. Right. Easy. If only I knew where they'd gotten off to. As soon as the spotlight had turned off, the crowd had moved in and they disappeared from view. That didn't mean they weren't here, though. They had to be. I danced through the crowd of people, sliding my way between the gaps and into the empty spaces. I crossed through the boisterous masses and headed toward the wall. If I could find the stairs to the upper level, maybe I'd be able to spot them. Unfortunately, this crowd was worse than a Thursday night during spring break. A heavyset man in a rain slicker waggled his eyebrows at me and tried to pull me in for a dance. Not wanting anything to do with the sweaty guy who smelled like fish, I held up a hand and backed away. Luckily, he shrugged it off. Unluckily, I bumped into a red-haired woman wearing striped pantaloons and carrying a pistol on her hip. Watch where you're going, she growled in a voice that sounded like a lifetime of drinking and smoking had caught up with her. Or would have, I supposed, if the sea hadn't caught her first. I lifted both hands in a show of non-confrontation. Sorry, just trying to avoid the wandering hands. The woman grinned, revealing a few gaps in her yellowed teeth. She lifted her stein in a toast. Enjoy the attention while you can. Uh-huh, I smiled, as if in agreement, but I knew it didn't reach my eyes. If I ever needed that kind of attention, something had seriously gone wrong in my life. Or death, for that matter. Taking a more careful step away from the pirate, I slipped between a woman in a ball gown and a Navy sailor in denim dungarees and a white cap. Hey, you doll, the Navy man exclaimed, grabbing my arm. What's the rush? Have a drink. It's a party. Damn it, I'd almost made it through. I tipped back my mead glass and smiled. I need a refill. Hold it up. He pushed my hand up into the air so the glass was above the heads of the crowd. The glass suddenly filled with the same golden mead as I'd been drinking before. You only need to go to the bar to change your order, he grinned. So now you can dance with me. He pulled me into a spin and moved me around the floor in what must have been a swing dance from the 40s. I had no idea what I was doing, but the guy was a damn good dancer. He led me around the dance floor, hopping and twisting this way and that, never letting me go and never losing the rhythm. I couldn't help but enjoy the ride. We also never spilled a drop of our drinks. How that was possible? I couldn't say. Like everything else around here, I would chalk it up to magic. I suddenly realized that truly the best way to explore the room would be to stick with Mr. Navy and dance my way through the crowd. He seemed safe enough. Not handsy at any rate. And no one else would bug me while I was with him. Of course, the downside was that he didn't seem to want to stop. The dancing was taking more out of me than a run with Ezra, and within minutes I was panting for breath. Still, I kept up the pace while my eyes scanned the room. We traveled in small circles that progressively moved us in a larger circle around the central bar. I caught a glimpse of Dion watching from his position behind the bar. He grinned and lifted a glass as I passed, and then he was out of sight. We moved back into the crowd and through to the opposite side, around and back. Still, no sign of stairs or of Ezra. The space seemed endless, and with each passing breath, the gathering seemed larger and more boisterous. Shouts picked up from one corner, a crash of glass from another. The music grew louder as if to drown out the noise of the crowd, but people only raised their voices in response. Individuals bounced into one another, barely making room for me and Mr. Navy as we passed. When they didn't, Navy Man would bounce us off in a new direction. At last, I spotted the staircase. I nodded my head in that direction, and Mr. Navy maneuvered us toward the wall. The crowd began to thin out some, and at last we slowed to a stop. My breath came in ragged gasps, but I grinned anyway. "That was fun, thank you," I said sincerely. "My pleasure, ma'am. You picked up the steps right quick." I took a sip of my chilled mead while waving a hand at my face. "Well, I need a breather now." "Would you like some company?" The man's brown eyes widened in innocent, hopeful anticipation. He couldn't have been more than 18 years old. "Thanks, but you should probably find a new dance partner. I'm not sure I'll be up for another go-around anytime soon." Mr. Navy's face fell, but like a true gentleman of the greatest generation, he tipped his fingers to his little white cap and moved back toward the party. I made my way up the spiral stairs. The polished wood of the banister was smooth beneath my fingers. With the tight turns, I could only see a few steps ahead. 10 minutes in, I paused to lean against the railing. I still couldn't see the top. I felt like I was on one of those continuous stair climber machines at the gym. They just kept going and going and going. At last, some hundreds of steps later, I reached the balcony level. Shockingly expansive decking stretched into the distance, way deeper than it appeared from below. But just like below, the balcony was crowded with people. They didn't dance, but mingled in tight groups like high school cliques at prom, except with sanctioned alcohol instead of clandestine sips from daddy's flask hidden in their jacket pocket. Seating had been arranged near the baluster to overlook the dancers, bar, and brewer's vat below. Looking out, I realized how big that vat and the hall actually was. Shaped like an oval, I'd been sitting on the narrow side talking to Dion. The length was at least double that, maybe 50 yards long, and the vat looked insignificant compared to the building in which I stood. Finding Ezra was going to be harder than I thought. That's the end of chapter 12. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your support of my YouTube channel. Please make sure you like this video, share it with your friends, or share the playlist with your friends if you're enjoying the story. Subscribe, click the little bell, do all the YouTubey stuff, and I will see you next week.